Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to today's lesson. So today we're going to be learning about alkenes and alkynes. Now this is very similar to what we learned the other day about the alkanes. So hopefully if you have a good understanding of what an alkane is, it'll make today a lot easier. So if you don't know what an alkane is or you have not seen that lesson, please go back and have a look at that because it is very important that you start off with that base knowledge that you can then build on. So we are going to start, of course, with definitions. So the definitions: alkanes, alkenes, alkynes. The alkanes is a hydrocarbon chain that only has single bonds. Alkenes have a double bond and alkynes have a triple bond. So the only difference between those is the A, E, and Y in the middle. And that is very, very important when we start talking suffixes and also secondary chains that include alkenes and alkynes. That is going to be one of the things that kind of differentiates the three different types of things, because they're very, very similar. So you need to have that A, E, Y correct. Hopefully that makes sense. So a good idea would to be write these down, stick them on a sticky note on your mirror, write them in your book in a colored pen, highlight them, get them in your brain so that you remember the difference and you know. So we're going to go straight into alkenes. So the main differences there are two. Firstly, the suffix is ene instead of ane. So if you have a double bond anywhere in that main chain, instead of being an alkane, it is now classified as an alkene. And so you need to be able to locate where that double bond is. If you don't put a locator in there, then they could draw the double bond anywhere and it's not going to be the same molecule. It's going to have different properties and we don't want that. So very, very important, must have a locator, and the suffix is now going to be ene instead of ane. Fairly simple. So same as with the alkanes, there are 6 carbons, which means the prefix is going to be hex. Fairly simple. Because of that double bond, it is an alkene, so we put an ene at the end, and then we need to put a locator somewhere. So with this locator, you can put it either at the start, which is kind of what we've been doing with our methyl groups and our ethyl groups and all the alkyl groups. So in that case, it would be 1 hexene. That's perfectly fine. I tend to do the second option, which, let me get my laser pointer, is this option here, where I put the locator in the middle, so between the hex and the ene. And the main reason I do that is because sometimes when you have a really huge, long molecular name, it makes it a little bit easier to just very clearly have that one directly next to the double bond, so you can look at the end, you can see it straight away and chuck it in there. Plus, I think it sounds cool because it's a hex 1-ene instead of a 1 hexene. Kind of a little bit cooler in my mind, but that may be just me. Up here, this is a different type of structural drawing than what I've showed you before. So it is very, very similar, but instead of writing carbons and hydrogens, as I said, scientists are sometimes pretty lazy. So instead of that, they just draw these lines, and the corners or the points represent a carbon. So each time it zigzags, that's 1 carbon. And then you would imagine that there's the hydrogens, appropriate number of hydrogens coming off. So this carbon 6 would have 3 hydrogens and carbon 5 would only have 2. And then carbon 2, if you look at that, has 3 bonds attached to it, so it would only have 1 coming off the end. So that's a very, very easy way to draw these molecules. You just do zigzag lines, and I cannot do that with a mouse, but you do zigzag lines and then you count the points. Hopefully that made sense. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Fingers crossed that made sense. So we've got 2 examples here, so we're going to go through the examples. Now, this first one is fairly simple. It follows exact same way that we did the last thing. So first thing, find the main chain, circle secondary groups. No secondary groups, main chain has 4 carbons, fairly easy. We number the carbons. So in this case, we're trying to get the double bond to be at the lowest number possible. So we're going to start from the right hand side and make our way across. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, fairly simple. Now, this is an added step. We are now working out, is it an alkane, an alkene, or an alkyne? So is it all single bonds? Does it have a double or a triple bond? In this case, it has the double bond. That's between 1 and 2. So it is a butene. And we've named the 4 carbons, which is the bute part. And then find the locator. the number carbon that it starts on is carbon number 1. So our locator in this case is number 1, and then you combine it together. So but-1-ene or 1-butene. So very, very simple. The only really added step is number 3, is just working out is an alkane, alkene, alkyne. A lot of the times you once you kind of work it out, you won't even have to include that step and it will just be automatically in your brain. But it's a good idea to kind of just keep it as a step that you've written down to make sure that you've got it kind of in your head ready to go. All right, with the second example, we again find the main chain, circle the secondary groups, done. We number the carbons. So in this case, we're going 1, 2, 3, again from right to left, because the double bond is over here. So that means the 2 locators are going to be 1 and 2. Instead of, if we started it over this way, it'd be 2 and 3. So we're going for the lowest numbers again. Name the main chain, including alkane, alkene, or alkyne. So it is a prop group. We have it coming off of carbon number 1, and it is an alkene. So it is prop-1-ene or 1-propene. Name the functional group. So we've got 1 carbon that is coming off of that, and so it is a methyl group. And then lastly, find the locator for that. Well, that's not lastly. Secondly, fourthly, fifthly, I don't know. Next we find the locator, so it's off carbon number 2, so methyl, and it's on 2. So combine 2-methyl prop-1-ene, or alternatively 2-methyl 1-propene. Either way is fine, whichever one works best for you. If it's easiest for you to remember putting the 1 in there, then do that. Otherwise, you don't have to. So that is very, very simple. The only thing that's changed is we're chucking in a number, an ene instead of ane. So hopefully that all makes sense to you. We've got an example here. You should already know at least one of these. So give it a go. Try it out. See how you go. I am going to, very similar to what I did with the last lesson, I'm going to put up a video that has the practice questions on it. So if you would like to see how I go through the steps, you can go and click on that video and watch that later. But give these a go first, try it out, and then if you need help or you're stuck or you want to check the answers, then go and look at that video. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to leave that there. Pause it if you want to give it a go. Otherwise you can come back to it, and I'm going to move on to alkynes. So alkynes, as I said before, triple bonds. So as you can see, there's 3 bonds here between carbon 1 and carbon 2. It is the exact same as with the alkenes. The only difference is instead of ene, it is yne. So instead of being a propene, it's now propyne. So again, same thing, 1-propyne or prop-1-ene. Either way is perfectly fine, and it follows the exact same convention system. You do the exact same thing. So hopefully that'll be fairly simple for you to work out and do. There's going to be 2 more practice questions here. I'm not doing an example of that one because, as I said, it is the exact same as the alkenes, which is very similar to the alkanes. So there are 5 practice questions for you to do. If we go back quickly, 3 of these, and then these 2, which are quite a little bit more complex, but hopefully by this point you should be able to name these without many problems. Again, these will be in the practice example questions video that I do for this lesson. So if you would like to see that, I'll probably leave a link somewhere. Otherwise, there is also a practice worksheet that you need to do, I think. So, probably just check that, shouldn't I? Yeah, there's a hydrocarbons practice sheet that you need to do. There's also going to be a video on that where I go through all of the questions in that practice sheet, do the working out for all of them, have all the answers there. So again, if you want to watch that, that'll also be a video. I might combine it. I might have it as 2 separate videos. Have a look at the links to find that out. But hopefully that'll help. That'll give you an idea of what you're doing. If you are still struggling at this point, by the end of those practices, you probably need to ask the questions, Google search, get the help, because everything after this point is more complex. We're moving on to actual functional groups, lots of different structures that we have to remember, lots of different prefixes and suffixes and names. So it's going to get more complex. So if you don't get this now, we need to work on that before we move on to the next stuff. Hopefully that makes sense. This is a short video, so So hopefully you have gotten what you need to out of it, and you can go through and do the practices. I shall see you guys in the next lesson when we start talking about functional groups. Alright, bye bye.